Welcome to TalkFluent English, the place where English becomes real, natural, and useful.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to TalkFluent English. I'm Nora, and I'm here with Kamal. Before we start today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. Your support helps us continue creating real English conversations for learners all around the world.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate you. Today's topic is something very real, very common, and very useful for daily English, talking about news.
Yes, because news is part of everyday life. Even if you don't watch TV news or read newspapers, news still reaches you. It comes through your phone, messages, social media, conversations, and even short comments like, "Did you hear about this?"
Exactly. And many English learners understand news when they read it, but they feel unsure when they want to talk about it. They don't know how to start, what words to use, or how much they need to say.
That's why today we are not teaching difficult vocabulary or formal news language. We are focusing on real spoken English, the English people use when talking about news with friends, family, coworkers, or classmates.
Let's start with a very important idea. News does not always mean big world events. News can be small, personal, and local.
Yes, for example, someone might say, "Did you hear the news? The bus schedule changed." That's news.
Or there's some news at work. We're getting a new manager. That's also news.
So the first thing to remember is this: news equals new information that people want to share.
Now, let's talk about the most common way news conversations start. Usually, they start very simply.
Some very common opening sentences are, "Did you hear the news? Have you seen the news today? There's some news about..."
And notice something important for English learners. We usually say the news, not a news.
Yes, this is very important. In English, news is uncountable. So we say, "The news is interesting. I have some news." That's good news.
But we don't say a news or many news.
Now, when someone asks you, "Did you hear the news?" you don't need a long answer.
You can answer very simply. For example, yes, I heard about it. No, what happened? I saw something online.
These short answers keep the conversation moving and feel very natural.
Let's imagine a real situation. You're at work and a colleague says, "Did you hear the news?"
If you don't know the news, you can say, "No, I didn't. What's going on?"
That one sentence is enough to start a conversation.
And if you already know the news, you might say, "Yes, I heard about that this morning."
Now, something very important for English learners is confidence. You don't need to know all the details of the news to talk about it.
Yes, many learners think they must explain everything perfectly, but that's not true.
You can keep things general. For example, I heard there were changes. I heard something about it, but I'm not sure. This kind of language is very natural, even for native speakers.
Now, let's talk about where news comes from, because this is another common part of conversation.
People often say where they heard the news. This helps the listener understand more.
For example, "I saw it on the news. I read it online. I heard it from a friend. It's all over social media."
And sometimes people add a small comment, like, "I'm not sure if it's true. I think it's confirmed." People are talking about it a lot.
This shows you are thinking about the information, not just repeating it.
Now, let's slow down and think about tone. When you talk about news, your tone matters.
Yes, some news is happy, some news is serious, some news is shocking.
For happy news, people often say, "That's great news. That's really good to hear."
For serious or bad news, people might say, "That's unfortunate. That's sad to hear. That's worrying."
You don't need to sound dramatic. Simple reactions are enough.
Let's do a small example together.
Okay.
I say, "Did you hear the news? They're opening a new hospital in the city."
I can answer, "Oh, really? That's good news. The city needs it."
Perfect. Short, natural, clear.
Now, another example. You say, "Did you hear the news? There will be delays in public transport tomorrow."
And you might answer, "Oh no, that's not good. It's going to be a long day."
Exactly. This is real daily English.
Another important thing is that news conversations often include opinions, but opinions don't need to be strong.
Yes, you can say, I think it's a good idea. I'm not sure about that. I don't really agree.
These are polite and common phrases.
Now, some learners worry about making mistakes when talking about news.
But remember, communication is more important than perfection.
If the other person understands you, you're doing great.
Talking about news is one of the best ways to practice English because it's always changing.
Every day brings new topics, new words, and new conversations.
So, even listening to news in English for a few minutes a day can help you a lot.
You don't need to understand everything. Just listen for keywords and ideas.
And then try to talk about it in simple English.
That's how confidence grows.
So, in this first part, we talked about what news really is,
How news enters daily conversation.
and how to start talking about news naturally.
In the next continuation, we'll go deeper into reacting to news, asking follow-up questions, and keeping the conversation going.
Now that we understand how news conversations start, let's talk about what happens after the news is shared. This is where many English learners feel stuck.
Yes, because hearing news is easy, but reacting to news and responding naturally is the real challenge.
The good news is reactions in English are usually short and simple.
Very true. You don't need long sentences. Most reactions are just one sentence, sometimes even one word.
Let's begin with neutral reactions. These are reactions you can use when you're not sure how you feel yet.
For example, oh really? I see. That's interesting.
These reactions are very safe. You can use them in almost any situation.
Now let's talk about positive reactions.
When news is good, people often react emotionally, but still simply.
Some common positive reactions are, that's great. That's good news. I'm happy to hear that.
And notice something important. English speakers often add small personal comments.
Like, that's great. You deserve it. That's good news for everyone.
These small additions make your English sound warmer and more natural.
Now let's talk about negative or serious news.
This is where tone matters a lot.
Yes, when news is sad or serious, English speakers usually speak more slowly and carefully.
Some common reactions include, "That's sad to hear," "That's unfortunate," "That sounds serious."
You don't need to explain a lot. Showing understanding is enough.
Let's practice with the realistic example.
Okay, I say, did you hear the news? The company is cutting jobs.
I can respond, "Oh no, that's sad to hear. I hope people will be okay."
Perfect. That response shows empathy, not judgment.
Now let's move to the next important skill, asking follow-up questions.
Yes, because conversations die when nobody asks questions.
The good thing is, follow-up questions don't need to be complicated.
Some very common ones are, what happened? When did it happen? Why did that happen?
And also, how did people react? What's going to happen next?
These questions help the speaker continue and give more details.
Let's do another example.
I say, there's news about transportation. Some roads will be closed.
I can ask, "Oh really? When will that start?"
Exactly. Very natural.
Now, English learners often worry about interrupting.
But polite interruptions are normal in conversation.
You can say, "Sorry, can I ask something?" Just to clarify.
These phrases are polite and respectful.
Now let's talk about sharing your opinion about news.
This is very common, especially among friends.
But opinions don't have to be strong or emotional.
You can start with soft phrases like, I think, in my opinion, it seems like.
These phrases show that you're sharing a personal view, not a fact.
For example, I think it's a good decision. In my opinion, this could cause problems.
Notice how calm and balanced these sentences sound.
Now let's talk about agreeing and disagreeing with news opinions.
Agreement is easy. You can say, "I agree. That's true. I feel the same way."
Disagreeing should be polite, especially in English.
Some polite ways to disagree are, "I see your point, but I'm not sure about that. I think differently."
These phrases help avoid conflict.
Let's imagine a small debate.
I say, I think this new policy will help people.
I might say, I understand your points, but I'm not sure it will work for everyone.
That sounds respectful and natural.
Now, another important part of news conversations is clarifying information.
Yes, because sometimes news is confusing.
You can ask for clarification like this. What do you mean exactly? Can you explain that a bit?
Or even, I didn't fully understand that part.
These sentences show honesty and interest.
Now, let's talk about rumors versus confirmed news.
Very important.
English speakers often show uncertainty when news is not confirmed.
They say things like, I heard that. Apparently, it seems like.
These words show that the information may not be 100% true.
For confirmed news, people say, it's official. It's been confirmed.
Knowing this difference helps you sound more accurate.
Now, let's connect this to daily life.
News conversations happen at work, at school, with friends, even with strangers.
And they don't need to be long.
Sometimes just 2 or 3 exchanges are enough.
What matters is confidence and clarity.
If you can react, ask one question, and share one opinion, you're already communicating well.
In the next continuation, we'll focus on different types of news: local news, world news, personal news, and how your language changes in each case.
We'll also talk about avoiding awkward silence and how to smoothly end a news conversation.
Now let's go deeper and talk about something very important. Not all news is the same, and we don't talk about all news in the same way.
Exactly. The words, tone, and even your body language can change depending on the type of news.
Let's start with personal news.
Personal news is news about someone's life. It could be about family, work, health, or plans.
For example, I got a new job, or I'm moving to a new city.
When someone shares personal news, English speakers usually respond with interest and emotion.
Yes, because personal news feels closer and more human.
Some natural responses are, "That's exciting. How do you feel about it? When did you find out?"
These questions show care, not curiosity.
Now, let's talk about local news.
Local news is about your city, neighborhood, or country.
Things like traffic changes, weather alerts, school updates, or public events.
When people talk about local news, they usually focus on how it affects daily life.
For example, did you hear about the road closure? Yes, it's going to affect my commute.
Notice the word affect. It's very common in news conversations.
Yes, people often ask, how does this affect us?
Now let's move to world news.
World news feels bigger and sometimes more serious.
Because of that, English speakers often sound more careful and less emotional.
They might say, it's a complicated situation. There are many sides to this issue.
These phrases show balance and respect.
Now, something many learners worry about. What if you don't know much about the news?
That's completely okay.
You don't need to be an expert to join a conversation.
You can say, I haven't read much about it, or I only know a little.
These sentences are honest and very natural.
Then you can ask questions.
Like, what's the main issue? Why is everyone talking about it?
This keeps the conversation going.
Now, let's talk about summarizing news.
This is a very useful skill, especially at work or school.
Summarizing means explaining the news in a short and clear way.
You can use phrases like, basically, in short, the main point is.
For example, basically, prices are going up because of supply problems.
That sentence sounds clear and confident.
Now, let's discuss expressing uncertainty.
News often changes, so people don't always speak with certainty.
English speakers use soft language like, it seems that, or there might be.
These words protect you from being wrong.
Very important for polite conversation.
Now let's talk about news overload.
This is when people feel tired of hearing too much news.
You might hear people say, I need a break from the news, or it's too much lately.
These are very modern, natural expressions.
You can also use them if you want to change the topic.
Yes, like, let's talk about something lighter.
Now let's talk about sharing news responsibly.
This means checking information before sharing it.
English speakers often say, I'm not sure if this is true, or I read this from a reliable source.
These phrases show responsibility.
Now let's practice a longer conversation example.
I say, did you hear about the changes in public transportation?
I respond, yes, I read about it briefly. It seems like they're trying to reduce traffic.
I can ask, do you think it will help?
I say, I think it might help in the long run, but it could be difficult at first.
That conversation sounds very natural.
And it uses simple English.
Now, one more important skill. ending a news conversation politely.
Yes, because conversations don't last forever.
You can say, well, let's see how it goes, or we'll know more soon.
These sentences close the topic gently.
In the final continuation, we'll focus on confidence, common mistakes, and how English learners can practice news conversations daily.
We'll also share simple practice techniques you can use on your own. Now, let's focus on the most important part of talking about news in English: confidence.
Yes, because many English learners understand news, but they hesitate to speak.
And that hesitation usually comes from fear of making mistakes.
But here's the truth. Mistakes are normal, even for native speakers.
Exactly. News conversations are not tests, they are human conversations.
What matters most is clarity, not perfection.
Let's talk about some common mistakes English learners make when talking about news.
The first mistake is trying to use very difficult words.
Yes, learners sometimes think complex English sounds smarter.
But in real life, simple English sounds more natural.
For example, instead of saying something very long and confusing, you can say, "This news is important. This situation is serious."
Clear, simple, and effective.
The second mistake is speaking too fast.
When people are nervous, they rush.
But slowing down actually makes your English sound more confident.
It also gives you time to think.
Another common mistake is saying nothing because you feel you don't know enough.
But remember, you can always say, I'm still learning about it. I don't know all the details.
These sentences are honest and natural.
Now, let's talk about daily practice.
You don't need special lessons to practice talking about news.
You can practice every day with small steps.
For example, read one short news headline.
Then say one sentence about it out loud.
Like, "I read some news about the weather today."
Or, there was news about transportation changes.
That's enough. One sentence is progress.
Another great practice is asking yourself questions.
Such as, how do I feel about this news? Does this affect my life?
Answering these questions builds speaking confidence.
You can also practice with the partner or even alone.
Talking to yourself in English is not strange, it's powerful.
Now, let's talk about tone.
Tone is how your voice sounds: calm, serious, curious.
News conversations usually sound calm and respectful.
Even when people disagree, they keep their tone soft.
This is very important in English-speaking cultures.
Now, let's imagine a final, realistic conversation.
You hear some news and you want to talk about it.
You start by saying, "Did you hear about the recent update?"
The other person says, "Yes, I saw it briefly."
You respond, "I think it could affect a lot of people."
They answer, "I agree. We'll see what happens next."
Simple, natural, confident.
And notice, no difficult grammar, no pressure.
Just communication.
That's the goal of learning English.
Not perfection, connection.
If you can share news, react to it, ask one question and give one opinion,
You are already speaking real English.
keep practicing a little every day.
Listen to news, talk about it, and don't be afraid.
Your English will grow naturally.
Thank you for spending this time with us.
We hope this conversation helps you feel more confident speaking English about news.